Podcasters, by and large, are not necessarily great writers, but what podcasters all have is a really strong personality. I would bet 90+% of their audience know the person's voice, knows what they look like, feels infinitely much closer and more connected to that creator.
So you're going to, follow them kind of wherever they go. And if it's easier to get it through email, so be it.
A lot of those emails going out, they're not going to be long form content. They might not even be a newsletter in the traditional sense, but what they're definitely going to be is links through to video and audio content in a lot of places. That's how they're treating email, I think, at the moment.
You kind of have to use it as a utility versus being like, hey, we're going to write 1,500 words on the same topic.
They want to be notified, and email's the convenient way to do it.
All right, what's up, Louis? So a couple of weeks ago, we got the 2026 Beehiiv State of Newsletters report. And I always find these things super interesting. They're obviously, they're marketing, but you always have to take them kind of with a grain of salt. It's always highlighting, I would say probably the best parts of a company. And I'm not just saying that about Beehiiv. I'm saying it like in general across these sort of things. But you and I took a deep dive into it. And what we want to do today is see what the takeaways are that are actionable, right? So based on the data, based on the stats, based on the anecdotes, what can a newsletter operator do today to actually make their newsletter better, in 2026 and beyond? So I want to get into the first stat really quickly here. What is the thing that stood out to you in this 2026 Beehiiv State of Newsletters report? And how can somebody, make their newsletter better?
It's interesting. I got to say kudos to Beehiiv for publishing this. A lot of other ESPs don't do that, and I wish others would, because Beehiiv, still a young company, still doesn't have a lot of data across newsletters, especially not bigger newsletters that have been going for a long time, because they don't tend to switch to new platforms. So it would be really interesting, and I wish that other platforms, Substack and others, would publish something more similar to this. If you're an ESP that does this and I haven't seen it, please start promoting it more heavily, or just send it to us so we can do that. We're not cherry picking Beehiiv. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, right? Like I have like 3 or 4 points that we can talk through on the Beehiiv side of like stuff where I looked at it and I was like, that's interesting, makes me think, makes me, I guess, in some cases sort of second guess my assumptions, or just validates what I was already thinking, what we talked about in our sort of 2026 predictions, but really useful. And then one of the things we'll do at the end, I think, which is going to be fun, is, like you said, this is a marketing report for Beehiiv. It's interesting because of a lot of the data they share. And what's really interesting to do is almost take this like a shareholder letter and look through, read between the lines, see what it's telling us about Beehiiv's plans for the future, where they are now, and maybe how things are going compared to some of the competition like Substack out there, which I know a lot of the geeks listening and watching will enjoy. So if I jump into the first one real quick, Beehiiv shared this list of sort of average open rates per topic, per niche, per theme. I don't know what you want to call it. And I guess the first thing to say on that, right? So the top open rate was 55%. Average open rate for newsletters. And that was for podcasters, this group that they call podcasters. And then below that, we had like some that were very broad. We had entertainment, we had history. We had
I think entertainment just means OnlyFans. So I'm surprised it's not much higher than that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the catch-all. And then we had some very niche ones as well. Like I think there was one that was like space or something.
Yeah, space and defense was way up there.
Space and defense.
I only know one. It's like payload. So I guess they're having, a really good year.
Yeah. And so that's one thing I would just say, like, as you look at those categories, don't make any decisions based off this. We are in some of those categories, presumably talking about very, very small numbers of newsletters. Right, and in the case of the defense ones, which is something I thought was interesting, which wasn't my main point, but I think is worth picking up. A lot of those newsletters that were higher on the open rate side of things, they had very corporate audiences who have firewalls and all sorts of protections in their inbox tools because they're sending to .gov addresses a lot of the time, or .edu. Yeah. And a lot of those opens aren't going to be real, unfortunately. So that was just one thing to bear in mind if you're looking at that. Yeah.
I think overall that's like there's a big takeaway here. And like, I don't think Beehiiv was super clear about that. I don't think they were doing it on purpose, but I think there's like a big asterisk on all of this, so that like data for newsletters is generally not very good. And I think they get into it a little bit and they say it's a little, they talk about MPP and they talk about Gmail kind of changing the inbox a little bit. But yeah, I think everything is, this is not a fun answer as we're going to go talk about it all, but it's like everything is with a grain of salt. Let's put that out there.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to jump into, though, which I did find really interesting when I looked at that list, is podcasters being at the top. Because podcasters, by and large, are not necessarily great writers. They're not necessarily writing the best newsletters out there that people are reading religiously with this amazing long form content.
Right.
But what podcasters all have that most other forms of newsletter don't is a really strong personality behind it, right? If you read a podcaster's newsletter, I would bet 90+% of their audience know the person's voice, knows what they look like, feels infinitely much closer and more connected in that sort of parasocial way that we talked about a couple of weeks ago to that podcaster, to that creator, newsletter or author, than to whoever is writing a random history or entertainment or even maybe a space newsletter, for example, right? And so I think that's really interesting because I think it tells us a lot about where you need to go or where it's maybe, I would say need, but like where I think most people probably should be going with a newsletter if you're starting one or if you're trying to improve on this year is you need to put the personality first. You need to have, I don't want to say be creator led necessarily, but I think it should be obvious who is writing and you need to cultivate a really strong, genuine, weird thing to say, but like a genuine parasocial relationship with the readers where they ideally know your voice, they know what you look like, they know your quirks, they know what's weird about you, and they can picture you, and it feels like getting an email from a friend rather than from a brand. And the last thing, I know you want to jump in on this, the last thing I'll say on that is because it's podcasters, right? A lot of those emails going out, they're not going to be long form content. They might not even be a newsletter in the traditional sense. But what they're definitely going to be is links through to video and audio content in a lot of places. And that's how I think most people that I know who are really smart and really thinking about like where newsletters are going, that's how they're treating email, I think, at the moment, the switch they're making, which is what has happened with newsletters is our readers, our audience have given us permission in an era, in an age of like algorithm powered everything, right? Algorithm powered feeds, where on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, even nowadays, just because I follow you and I like your stuff, it's up to Danny Musk or whoever to decide whether I ever get to see the next 10 bits of really great content you create. And so giving us the email address is them giving us permission to proactively push that to them, right? But just because the reader is or the consumer is saying, yes, I want your content, I want you to be able to push this to me into my home so that I know when something comes up and I don't have to rely on the algorithm doing the work for me, which it might not, that doesn't mean that they want to read long form 1,500 word essays every day or every week from that podcast. Or it just means they want to be notified and email's the convenient way to do it. So that was my big two takeaways from that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes a bit more of a utility email, right? And I think it just shows another way to use a newsletter platform, right? And I'd be very curious to see. So TBPN, which has become like incredibly popular, I think they call it show notes, and they send it out on Substack, and it has a lot of followers, and they do actually write some unique content, which I don't think. Like, I love the show. I don't think the content that they write is particularly good. I think to your point is like they're very, very good at podcasting. And I actually think it's them writing it. I would be very curious to see like if people are just skimming through that and clicking through because that's how they get to, the live feed of TBPN, or if they're actually like caring about reading that. I agree with you. I think you kind of have to use it as a utility versus being like, hey, we're going to write 1,500 words on the same topic, because I think it's just different. But overall, I totally agree with you. I think 2026, and we've been talking about this, so I think, we were definitely first, all through 2025 is that like creator led, or at the very least, people led newsletters, are important. And I think why, podcasters or YouTubers are winning at this is exactly what you said, is like they already have either a great personality that you want to follow, you feel connected to them, or they're providing, some value to you that is like so undeniable that you need it every single week. So you're going to, follow them kind of wherever they go. And if it's easier to get it through email, so be it. And so I think that just shows if you're building an email, right, like you should be taking parallels from YouTube, is like provide a ton of value, be super niche, be personable, as much as you can do that in a newsletter. Like maybe it even means putting more, video in your newsletter, video of you. Like I've actually been talking to some advertisers about the water coolest of me doing, like video ads in the newsletter, right? Or combining that with some content. And so then people have to watch the ad, as part of, some extra content, right? So just getting creative with those things. But that just not only adds, helps sell the ad, but that's going to give people a better understanding of who's writing the water coolest every day and like get to know me a little bit better. And before we go to, kind of the next point, I'll close it out. This is something I've been kind of workshopping here. I think 2026 is going to be the year of the about page. And so let me clarify that. I think right now everyone kind of talks about, a landing page should have nothing on it, right? It should just be, an opportunity to sign up. I actually think that there's going to be another important part there, and that is going to be the about page. I find myself more and more going to about pages on newsletters, and I find it super generic. It's kind of like this weird brand mission statement. And I'm like, wow, this is probably just written by AI. Whereas if I go and there's a picture of somebody and their dog and their family, and it's like they did X, Y, and Z, and they went to Harvard and they worked at McKinsey, I'm like, wow, like I want to listen to this guy about marketing or, whatever it may be. And I don't think that's necessarily, works for everything, but I think that is going to become more important, that you need to be out there and you can't just be this, anonymous person. So I could see more people leaning into making about pages, on the landing page, and that being like an important part of getting signups.
I think
Do you have an
definitely
about page for your newsletter?
no. I have an about section, which is further down the page if people are still looking for something else. So
Yeah.
focus on getting the sign up. If for some reason they don't want to, that's the next thing basically, is that sort of social proof section. And there's a little 2-minute video of me sort of explaining stuff about who I am and
Yeah, like
my
I think
background.
I think that's such a great idea. Like the 2-minute video. That's something, again, like I'm thinking about for the water coolest, is like, what can I put something like in my welcome series, right? That's like a video. Think about how much of a game changer that is when you get greeted with a video versus like just another line of text. So yeah, I think anywhere where you can kind of create more, be more like a creator in 2026 in your newsletter, I think is a huge win.
Yeah.
Anything else before we get to my
No,
next point?
let's jump to your first one, which is something that I'm excited to hear your take on this, because
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
we
we're
have
gonna.
opposite takes. So this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah. So okay. So this stat like stood out to me as like the holy shit moment of this entire report, and I don't know if it was buried on purpose. It felt a little buried, but so this is 2024 versus 2025. The click through rate, average click through rate for 2024, 4.74%, which I thought was actually pretty high. I feel like most newsletters, like traditional newsletters, are closer to like 2%. So 2024 is 4.74%. 2025 dropped to 3.23%. So that's 1.5 percentage points drop off. My initial takeaway was, holy crap, that is a huge plummet, especially considering everything we're hearing that, bots are clicking more. So I would have thought that number would actually go up. And so Beehiiv's kind of, rationale behind that is, more inbox competition. The bar for compelling call to actions and engaging links is rising. And this is what I kind of thought was interesting, is one of their points was it also reflects emerging behavior. Readers often consume the content in the newsletter itself. And so this is something that pisses me off to no end as a reader and a newsletter writer and a consultant, right? Because we have this incentive we want to keep people in the newsletter. We want to write like killer content. That's all we talk about. But the way we make money, especially for an ad supported newsletter, is literally to send people out, right? And then I also hear from a lot of salespeople, if you just have a link dump of newsletters, most advertisers don't want to work with you because they don't think it's a captive audience. But those tend to have the highest click through rate. So you would think by pure statistics, like an RSS feed would actually be where a newsletter advertiser would want to be, but that's not the case. So I yeah, this always just puts my brain in a pretzel, because it's one of those conversations where it always leads to the very philosophical conversation of, we're top of funnel, there's brand awareness that you can't account for, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to click through rate for advertisers, unfortunately, in 2026. But I'm curious on your take. My thought on 4.74 in 2024 versus 3.23 in 2025 was, holy shit, that is catastrophic for the industry and very bad. What is your take on it?
I haven't looked at numbers for other ESPs on this, so I don't know if there has been any trend downwards. I think I remember from Omida that they were saying the opposite. So I don't think this is an industry-wide thing, but I wouldn't stake my
Yeah, let's
reputation
put
on it.
the asterisks right here.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts on this though, as a bit of I guess a little bit of an insider, not to Beehiiv, but to sort of like behind the scenes of ESPs and statistics and how that stuff works. First caveat I'll say is one of the things that annoys me most about Beehiiv as a product, but also as like a marketing function, is they are never transparent whether they mean click through rate or clicks to open rate. They say
Mm,
CTR. When they say CTR, most of the time they're actually talking about clicks to open rate, which looks bigger, which is why they use it in their marketing stuff because it looks better.
yep. Smaller denominator.
I'm not going to pick that fight again, but yeah, they interchange those, right? So if you also look, we see in
And
the
by the
last
way, if, power move, if you're not using that on your media kit, you probably should be, because I guarantee most other people are. So
yeah. The other context is in that same page of the report, they talk about open rates increasing slightly. I think it's 37% in 2024 to 41% on average in 2025.
yep.
That is almost like that as a newsletter platform matures, the open rates on average should go down because the audiences that are on there have been there longer, they're less engaged, they stop receiving emails, they stop checking that email address, their preferences change. If you look at something like MailChimp that's been around for ages, their average open rate is going to be a lot lower than that. It's not because their deliverability is worse, it's because they're sending to people who died 30 years ago in some cases. I'm not joking. Well, 20 years ago. I'm not
Yeah,
joking.
that's fair.
It's true. And so Beehive's
Maybe everyone on Beehive is just really good about cleaning their list.
maybe we'll see. So the fact that it's gone up slightly means definitely something is going on, right? And I think we all know what that is. It's MPP, it's the Google stuff, it's the huge increase in open rates, fake machine generated open rates, which is definitely more than 4% last year, but the actual rates will have fallen slightly, and then it will balance out as showing as a 4% increase. So if they're measuring clicks to opens rather than click through rate, the pure click through rate, that alone would explain. Like if the click rate had stayed the same and the open rate the open rate has been artificially inflated, basically,
Mhm.
that would make sense, right? The same number of humans are still opening, or slightly fewer. Um,
Yep.
Same number of clicks shows up as the same thing because it's been inflated. So the other reason potentially why the click through rate might have gone down. I don't think I said this explicitly, but I'm going to add it in real quick. There's no way that it's because people are reading more long form content in their inbox. That is not a trend. That's not something that's happening. I would stake my reputation on that 100% for sure. The only situation where I would believe that was if you did a survey of the open rates of newsletters on Substack or newsletters on any platform that have paid subscriptions as their primary revenue source, they are
Mhm.
optimizing for content in the email and opens. I would believe that has gone up slightly, especially for the good paid newsletters. Beehiiv sends 28 billion emails a year and is making or is paying out $19 million a year in paid subscription revenue. Paid subscriptions are not a significant part of their newsletters revenue models.
Right.
So that's definitely not the case for them. But what could be the case is that a lot of the opens, thanks to these AI powered newsletters and the relative ease of spinning up an AI written newsletter with fraudulent subscribers and getting machine generated opens and machine generated clicks. Yes, there are a lot of bot clicks, but there are a lot more bot opens per bot click, if that makes sense. For every one bot click, you're going to get a lot more bot opens. So I think what's happened is the rise in machine generated opens and bots and AI written newsletters that are not really being read by any humans on Beehiiv is causing this effect of the opens going up, but the click rate going down.
That's a lot of math, a lot of numerators and denominators. But no, I totally agree with you. I think it comes back to, the numbers are kind of hard to back into. And there's probably a lot more fuckery going on, in the inbox today. And I think I'll leave it kind of with one takeaway for someone looking for something actionable is I think if you're running kind of an ad supported newsletter, I think the thing you should be optimizing for is not necessarily clicks, although an advertiser does care about performance. Like, don't get me wrong, that's basically all they care about in 2026 is like you need to be optimizing for sales or engagement or results for them. And I think you can kind of do that in two ways. Is like one, making sure you're working with the right advertisers, and that comes down to like collecting the right data about your audience, like first party data. And then I think working closely with those advertisers to get data about about the engagement, about the results, those sort of things. It's really hard to do because a lot of advertisers don't want to share that or they don't have time to share that. But I think really pushing on that could like help you immensely to, optimize your newsletter, not just for clicks, but for actually driving results. And I think that's just going to become more and more important. People are only going to want to work with the folks who, drive results.
I'm going to do a quick run through because I have three that are like small. They were interesting. They stood out to me, but I don't think we need to talk about them very long. It was more like, oh yeah, this chimes in with what I've been seeing this year, what we've been talking about. Makes sense, right? So first one is short form video as a growth channel.
Okay.
I know a bunch of people now who are generating millions of views on short form video platforms like Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts every month, and who are growing large newsletter audiences, engaged newsletter audiences off the back of that. Not because those people want to read, but like we talked about, because if you don't go and sign up for that newsletter or opt in to claim that freebie or whatever it is, I might never come across you again on my For You feed, right? So I think consumers are like warming up to the idea that they need to come off platform. It's becoming more normalized that if they see something they like, they're going to take that effort to go and do it because they know they're otherwise never going to find it again. And that feel like I don't want to say a generational opportunity, but it feels like an opportunity right now of like, if you can, and you don't need to be good, and it can be faceless, and it's surprising how easy this stuff can be if you just get into the habit. Short form video, especially for audiences where there isn't a lot of competition for it right now. So like millennial and older audiences in like professional spaces, for example.
Yep.
That is a huge opportunity right now, in my opinion.
That's super interesting. That still surprises me that works. And that's probably just because I'm more of a newsletter guy than a social guy, but I'm shocked. But do you think I'm shocked it works, one, and two, do you think it actually drives the right quality? I mean, basically you were saying it probably doesn't drive the right quality, right? From what you were saying, it's not driving the right good quality newsletter subscribers because they just want a freebie or something like that.
No, I think it does drive the right quality subscribers. I think where it is potentially more challenging is if you're trying to convert people into the habit of reading a daily newsletter. You may struggle slightly more. But I think for
you're
most,
saying kind of like you're talking like the 55% podcast people, right? Because someone's just getting their content, maybe their social content delivered via email, and they like that. So it become maybe more of like a utility email.
Yeah, but I mean, it becomes like it's your way of getting permission to get into their life, like to push your content to them rather than waiting to see if the algorithm decides to favor you
Yeah,
again, right? To not lose you. So I think where it works best is if you have a quiz, a resource, or something. You're trying to get people who at some point are going to join your community, buy your thing, listen to your podcast, rather than necessarily a long form newsletter that comes
right.
every day, right? If you're a habit forming newsletter like the Water Coolest Morning Brew, something like that is probably going to be more of a challenge. But then
Yep.
that's probably, in my opinion, why people like Morning Brew, the Pour Over, everyone is investing. Everyone who has one of these successful daily habit forming generic emails is divesting as hard as they can into an app, quizzes, games, short form video, long form video, podcasts, right? That's the top thing that they're all working on and like super frustrated and like trying to push ahead desperately on to be able to capture some of that, I think.
I like that. What else you got?
Yep, two more real quick ones. Next one is a really quick one. Local newsletters mentioned in the report. What stands out to me there is always two things. Number one, it is really, really easy. Anyone can start a local newsletter. Anyone can make $1,000 a month with a local newsletter. At the same time, almost nobody is making $500,000 plus a year from a local newsletter. At the point that for me is the point if you're in the US where you've created a business, not a job for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with having if you have a $200,000 a year newsletter, you're probably pulling in about $100,000 a year to take home. Nothing wrong with
Mhm.
that at all. But that is a job. You can't leave that. That's not really a business that sort of when you leave is going to carry on and support you. And there are only there are ones that have raised investment money. They're doing it in 50 different audiences and stuff. Okay, they're not really for me a local. They're not what we're talking about here, right? But just genuine people who are just like often starting a local newsletter for their city or their town.
Right.
Very few of them are making real money, and they are the ones that always keep popping up in these interviews and reports and everything. And that they're not scamming anybody. They are doing it. They're crushing it. They're very, very good at what they do. But this feels to me more and more like that sort of like 2010s drop shipping moment of like anyone can make
Yeah.
$500,000 a month doing this, but hardly anybody's going to make $500,000, $1 million a year at any point doing this anytime soon, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree with you. I think if you're going to spend your time thinking niche, it's probably not like niche in your neighborhood. Like go a broader niche, I would say, right? And that's something we'll talk about after. I had one more point on that, but yeah, it's like I know like TJ and Ryan, like those guys are crushing it, but like those guys are killer operators, like smart entrepreneurs. And I think yeah, to your point, I was literally going to say drop shipping. I feel like it has become that thing, or like NFTs or something. It's like kind of become this get rich quick scheme, but I think you're not going to get rich for most people, and it's probably not going to happen very quickly. So I think you're going to be severely disappointed.
Yeah, everybody, I think, and I don't want to like hit down on entrepreneurship because obviously I did that and I think it's really valuable and it can work out really well for you. But I think every generation of like people coming out of college, there is always something where it's like that you shouldn't go and get a job. This is the thing that's going to do really well for you. And
Hmm.
you can make just enough money just quickly enough without needing any experience for it to hook you. And those are the dangerous ones. And I think that
Yep.
this is that for me is one of those things right now. Um, please don't waste 3 years of your life all in earning $2,000 a month on a local newsletter.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot better places to build even outside of the newsletter space for sure.
And the people who are going to build $1 million local newsletters, the nice thing about giving this sort of advice or warning is the people who are going to do it are going to completely ignore us and they were going to do it anyway. So it's safe to say, hopefully we're only putting off the people who weren't going to be successful.
And ironically enough, right, like the big guys of the world, it's like they're not really niche anymore because they're going national, right? It's like they have local newsletters, but they're setting up, a bunch of different chapters or whatever you want to call them, like all over the country. So in theory, they become this like much broader audience, and then they're using, the same operations and all the scale that they have to make that worthwhile.
Yeah. At the same time, great time to be selling shovels in the local newsletter space, though, right? Like, create
Yes.
a course on local newsletters, do some of the background work of like create a tool that local newsletter operators can buy that generates all of the content for them or something. Do the ad sale. I don't know. There's a bunch of things there that must work.
Yeah, the pick and shovel trade is hot right now. And I mean, we saw that right there. We talked to Ryan and Jesse, right? They hosted a local newsletter conference. Like it's big enough to have people paying for a conference.
And my last one, really quick, then we'll hand over to you, is around click through rates again. So the stat that stood out to me as actually useful, and is probably the one stat that I'll take away as less of as like someone who's interested in newsletters, but as a reminder to myself to make a change, is the fact that in general, click through rates on emails were much higher on weekends than during the week. Anecdotally, that makes sense to me. There's much less competition on weekends, and people have a lot more time to read. If you send me an email now, I'll be in a call for 20 minutes. By the time I finish that call, there's 13 more emails waiting for me, and I actually have to reply to some of them. I'm probably never going to read yours. You send it to me on a Saturday, chances 20 minutes later, I'm going to be sitting in the car waiting for my wife, and I will read that email. So I thought that was really useful and interesting, and definitely something that people should consider exploring.
I think it's a good point, and I think the way I think about that is like really, I've almost like built this into when I'm building who the persona is. Like I always talk about, you should be writing to an audience of one. And that's like one of the things that I've recently kind of built in is where this person is reading it, like what time they're carving out to read this thing. Like you truly need to think about that because people only have so much time in a day. And it's like, when are they reading this? Like, how are they fitting it in? And then like, what are they going to do? Is it something they just kind of put in the back of their brain and forget about? Is it something they say, oh, I need to text my friend about it? Like ideally with the water coolest, and this is no joke, like I truly want people sitting on the toilet after their coffee in the morning, like first thing when they get into the office, scrolling, reading the water coolest and texting their friend, did you see what Elon said? Did you see what the Fed chair said? And I think it's like that important to think about that, and goes into like broader brand building. But I think you should really be thinking like, where are they reading this? And then what is the immediate action they're going to take? And if you can't answer that question, it's probably not, niche enough, or you kind of need to go back to the drawing board, because you don't want to just be this, generic kind of newsletter. And I wouldn't be surprised if Morning Brew and 1440 think about that, right? Like they, they're very broad, but there's probably a specific time that they send based on when they want people to be thinking about them and how, what sort of action they want them to take.
Something I got to do at the beginning of 2025 was to play around with a group of really smart people at an email platform who were looking in depth at the best time to send out emails. And at the moment, the way that like sort of sending times work, it's done based on where they think the location of the person is, right? So you'll send it, okay, we'll send it at what we think is the best time, 7 a.m. in Eastern, 7 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Mountain, blah, blah,
right.
blah. Right? They'll stagger it that way based on where they think you are. What this team was doing, I wasn't really helping, I just got to watch while they were doing it, was they were testing, hang on, we can figure out a lot of the time what time someone actually opens the email, if they open it, and what days do they not open it on when it's sent that way. And they build over time, especially if you have regular sending, they can figure out, okay, this is a time across all these different emails that this person is receiving when they're likely to be in their inbox and when they're likely to read it. And if you send just before that, it turns out that the open rates go up a lot. I don't remember the exact number, but like not 5%, like 20%. They go up. And I think that's being built out into like an actual feature. I'm not 100% sure where it is now, but that was really surprising to me. Like, I guess for the water coolest, Morning Brew, habit forming newsletters like that, you have to send daily because it's a habit forming thing. You want to be sending kind of at the same time every day, most likely, to get into that habit. I think the bigger challenge is like, what if you're sending a newsletter like mine that goes out once a week? What if you're just sending like an article every week or a link to if you're a podcaster, for example, if you create one, let's say what's his name? Beard Meets Food, who does like a food an all you can eat challenge every week. And he
Yeah,
puts out
yeah.
a video every week. Uh, Presumably, you want to put out the video, they get the YouTube notification, and then a day or 2 days later, you send out the email reminder in case they haven't watched it yet. And you probably don't want that going out at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning because
Mhm.
everyone is busy at work. But if you send that out on a Sunday evening or a Sunday afternoon, they can be like, oh, yeah, I have an hour to kill now. Let's watch that video.
And I would go even a layer deeper with something like that, where I would try to think about it. And you are certainly the YouTube expert compared to me, but like, we talk about, getting the hook right, and getting kind of that engagement up. Those first 30 seconds to a minute count for a lot, right? So like, I would be thinking about the algorithm too. It's like, how do you hack the algorithm if you're a YouTube creator? It's like, is it better to send a bunch of people all at once when the video drops, or is it better to send them a day later? And so that's something that, if I was sending that email, that's something that I'd immediately go to ChatGPT and be like, let me figure out exactly what time and how I should be doing this. And that's probably what I would base that send on.
Funny, I've asked YouTube people about that. I don't know confidently this is the right answer, but this is what I've been told. It certainly is mirrors my experience. If you release a new video, a lot of the decision about how many people see that is based off of the first viewers, how they behave, right? Whether they click on it, whether they watch it, and what the retention is like on them. If you send out an email to your audience, to a lot of people, and they click through and click on that video, a lot of them are going to click through because they want to have it open in their browser later, or they want to have it ready for when they're going to watch it. But they're not
Mm,
actually somewhere where they can sit down and watch a 15-minute video at that time. So what you're doing is getting the people who were going to be your 100% retention when they saw it an hour later at YouTube to become your 15 seconds churn. And that really hurts then the organic exposure, because YouTube goes, it's not
mm.
worth us promoting this as much as we normally do, because the signs are that we're not going to be able to show 5 ads on average. We're only going to be able to show 1 or something.
Right, right.
So apparently it's not a great idea. That's the logic behind it that I was given. I don't know if that's true, but it's definitely borne out for me.
Yeah, I guess you have to get scientific about it, but I think that speaks to the broader point of, you really need to be thinking about, what action you want somebody to take, when you send them an email, and kind of reverse engineer from there. Again, if you want them to make, a big purchase decision, right? It's probably something that maybe it's better off if they're at home, they're on a laptop, they're thinking about it, versus, they're on the go, at lunch, in line at Chipotle. They're not going to say like, oh, let me pull the trigger on a, $5,000 product, right? That sort of thing. Any other things? Was that your 3 big points?
Well, those are my three small points to finish us off. But
Oh
I
yeah,
think you
yeah,
had
small
you
point.
had 1 or 2 extra, right?
Yeah, I had a few other ones, but I'll go with this one. So I think they were talking about click through rate, but I'm going to bring it back to content because that's what I do. But Beehive's point was curation beats volume. So they're saying newsletters with 3 to 5 meaningful, relevant links consistently outperform link heavy digests. Readers want curation, not more noise. And I think I talked about this in the 2026 preview episode. I think I could see the 2026 not quite being the year of curation, because that's already happened, but I think like aggregation, curation, smart aggregation could be super important, because I think it all ties back to, right, like creator led, personality. I think having somebody who's a tastemaker and somebody you trust, and them dropping a handful of links for you, is so important. And I think like one, actionable takeaway I'll give you guys, before we wrap here, is something like I call, people call it all sorts of different things, but I call it the browser history, right? And so it's those like sharing those 3 or 4 things that are open in your, in your tabs. And I think, Morning Brew calls it, open tabs. But it's like those 3 or 4 things, and I think that's so valuable versus, again, like 20 links that like, hey, these are a bunch of things that exist on the internet. When you transform the messaging to be, hey, these are 5 things or 3 things that I really care about, it flips from being, this like kind of resource RSS feed to being, here's a here's kind of my content diet. Here's how I think. And I think that becomes incredibly more valuable. And I mean, I always go back to this, but it's like James Clear, Tim Ferriss are the absolute killers of this. And I know like Sean Purry does like, 5 tweet Tuesday or something like that. Again, like very similar. It's so valuable because these are all like three people that I consider to be very smart. And it's like, I get to understand, a peek behind the curtain, how their brain works. So I would, certainly say if you are considering, putting any sort of link dump in your newsletters, I 100% agree with this. Like make it 3 to 5 and position it as like a very behind the scenes look, why you find them valuable, give a little blurb about it versus just saying something like, hey, here's 20 links that, every person in finance needs to know. It's like, yeah, that's helpful, but I think you are going to get a lot more clicks, and clearly the data shows it. So go add that to your newsletter in 2026 if you want more clicks, guaranteed.
Yeah, I love that. Those were really great examples. Those are all people who I would consider to be sort of like celebrities in their own right. And something I hear from newsletter people a lot when they want to do a curation newsletter and do a good job of like curating and writing and pitching the links in a way that makes people want to click on them, is, well, I'm not, of course people are going to want to read the three things that James Clear puts in there, almost irrespective of how he formulates it, because it's
Yep.
James Clear, and people feel like, or Arnie Schwarzenegger does a great job of that as well, right? Like his newsletter has some very clickable stuff in it. But if you want to take some examples of people who maybe aren't quite as as well known and aren't relying as much on their name, I think Josh Spector's newsletter for the interested is absolutely amazing at this. He has insanely high click through rates.
It's like two sentences. It's an amazing newsletter
Yes.
that everyone should sign up for.
Which is, it's curated though. He sends, rather than sending like a link roundup every week of 10 links, he sends, I think, 1 or 2 every day, which is great. And the other one that I'm going to have to find now for us, but it's worth doing because it's really awesome, is
And while you're looking for
Yes.
that, I can never keep up, but I think that's Alex Hormozy does something very similar too. It's like very short, to the point. Again, I would say he's certainly a celebrity at this point, but to everybody who says, only celebrities can do this, I would point to a bunch of these guys who are like anonymous newsletters, guys or girls who are anonymous newsletters. They're doing this and people are following them, and nobody has any idea who they actually are. They could obviously be lying about, all their credentials. And I would say, right, like, I think the going back to the creator led point, the personality led point of a newsletter, I think you don't need to necessarily have like a best-selling book to become a celebrity in your own little niche. Like you could own, being the smartest guy, in AI marketing, whatever it is, right? And if you kind of establish yourself as that person, people are going to, again, look at you as like the tastemaker of like, I need to know how this guy's thinking because I appreciate all the stuff that he writes in his newsletter, or I appreciate all the stuff that he puts on LinkedIn. So I wouldn't let that, stop you. I think it's just a little bit more about, it's going to be harder to build your credibility, but such is life.
Yeah. The other one quickly was Jessica Eastman Stewart. She writes a Jessica's 5 Things Friday, I think it's called, or 5 Friday Things, or something like that.
Cool.
Very different niche, but a really good example of like a very, very, very passionate audience. And she's doing something right in the way she writes it, because the click-through rates she has are absolutely amazing.
Cool. So I think that does it for kind of our takeaways from the Beehiiv 2026 state of newsletters. I think we wanted to close quickly just on, what does it say about Beehiiv? So we both read through it. I'm going to give you the floor for your parting thoughts, Louis. What do you think it means for the future of Beehiiv, for the future of the platform, maybe something for the broader industry, in general?
Yeah, my completely unbiased take, which people definitely say that, but like obviously I'm sold my company to a competitor, and still have a stake in that parent company. So in some ways, obviously very biased against Beehiiv, but at the same time, I still run Sparkloop day to day, and Beehiiv is one of our biggest. Beehiiv newsletters are one of our biggest user bases. We help newsletters on Beehiiv make a lot of money. So I actually would much rather see Beehiiv thriving than a Substack or someone like that, because we don't make any money from Substack. We make a lot of money from Beehiiv. So I'm not quite as biased as I think some people would
I
maybe
feel
want to
like I
make
need
out.
to go buy a stake in Beehiiv just to even this out, right? So we can both say that, and we'll have little disclaimers just going back and forth at the bottom of the screen.
Are you the only Beehiiv user who doesn't have equity in Beehiiv?
I got asked, so many times in all of those rounds. I think that's what the thing is like. I don't think there's almost no way they fail, because literally everybody in the industry has something tied to it. It's I wouldn't call it a Ponzi scheme, of course, but I think everybody has their toes in the water, which I think is good, right? Because then it kind of incentivizes everyone to help make sure they win, and but
Yeah, maybe.
but yes, I was the only one who didn't
Oh
do
dear.
without it.
Okay. Well, yeah. My takeaway on it. So I looked at the headline numbers, and they sent 28 billion emails in 2025, which is a lot of emails.
Yep.
Probably puts them in the order of magnitude of a Substack, smaller, I would say, still than a Kit or someone like that, but in that ballpark of Substack
What do you
size.
think like a Klaviyo sends? They send trillions. They have to, right?
Yeah. I would say they probably send more than 28 billion emails on Black Friday alone. I'm
Yeah,
not
I mean, I
joking.
guess with
Yeah.
Shopify, yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I think they're very different orders of
Yeah,
magnitude. Bear that number in mind: 28 billion emails a year. Looking at the revenue that they produce for creators, that was the thing that really stood out to me, and that's what I'm looking at. Right? Is Beehiiv, lots of fancy bells and whistles. They've put the price up a lot this year. The real big bet they're making is that they can do something extra to help creators earn revenue or grow their newsletters. Right? It's not just about, we have a nice platform that does nice emails, and now we do a website, now we do all this other stuff. It's supposed to be about helping people make money. That's where they're spending their investor money. That's what they're betting the house on, essentially.
Mhm.
And I look at those numbers. Number one, the only one that they report the actual annual revenue on, which tells you something in itself, is subscription revenue. They help their newsletters make $19 million a year from paid subscriptions in 2025. I'm not sure what they mean by help. I think they just mean facilitate, because you can do that Ghost, Substack. Okay, Substack takes a 10% cut, but Ghost doesn't. Kit doesn't take anything like that. There's a whole bunch of places that you could do this, right? Beehiiv not actually
And by
providing any
subscription
value.
revenue, you're saying somebody comes to pay for a paywalled tier of the water coolest, right?
Exactly. Yeah. For example,
Okay.
yeah, they facilitate $19 million a year last year of subscription revenue. That is, I mean, it's a nice big number. I would like to be making $19 million a year, but there are newsletters on Ghost, there are newsletters on Substack, individual newsletters who are making either more than that or very close to that, individual ones. So all the money that Beehiiv creators are making from paid subscriptions across all of the newsletters on Beehiiv. So we're really talking on that front about what, maybe 50 newsletters that are making a reasonable-ish sort of one person can survive off it income from paid subscriptions.
I'm curious why do you think that is? Do you think it's just because the people who are serious about that are going elsewhere because they don't view Beehiiv as the platform to build a subscription business on, or do you think it's something else? Because I mean, they, in theory, right, they do the same thing, right? It's a paywall. Like there's splits. Like you can go and sign up. It's like fairly basic. I want to say Substack is doing anything totally different. It just feels like they started that business. They kind of built like the Patreon model into it, and whereas Beehiiv probably led with like, hey, we're going to be the place where you come and monetize your newsletter through ads, right? But like, do you agree with that it's just kind of the different types of positioning of the two ESPs, or do you think it's something else?
I think it's difficult to say. I think it takes a long time to build up subscription revenue, right? Longer than it takes to build up other kinds of revenue. I think you're
Right.
also very, very hesitant, if things are going well, to leave the platform that you're currently on. And I think Beehiiv is in a very difficult position where people who want to and are habitually paying for written content they're doing it through Substack. Way easier to grow a paid newsletter through Substack than any other platform. Um, because people, it's one click, they're already there, they're normalized, they know that's how they pay for it, right? So I think most people would be on Substack if you're that kind of creator. And if you're a bigger media brand, you're probably going to be on Ghost or something that was around with the infrastructure, the payment infrastructure before Beehiiv existed. And there's no way you'd move off
Mhm.
something that has, like, they're still relatively limited in their features there,
Yep.
unfortunately, because they've gone very broad, but very, very narrow. Or not very deep, sorry. And then the other thing is, like, if you're a podcaster, maybe you're using Patreon or YouTube or Twitch or like all these different kinds of content creators who maybe are sending their emails through Beehiiv. Beehiiv doesn't facilitate very well sort of like paid content exclusives in the sense of like, a course like Thinkific or something like that would be able to do. Um,
Yep.
there isn't like that group chat vibe of having a Patreon or something with those exclusives and the discoverability there. There's not really many reasons, unless you're starting a new newsletter today and don't like Substack, to use Beehiiv for that. Really, there's not really anything they're offering that you don't get better versions of somewhere else. Um, then, so this, the second thing. So they have their paid subscriptions. Second one they have is their ad
So
network.
let me just ask you. So what's a takeaway there from a business perspective? What I'm gathering is it doesn't really matter because that's not Beehive's business.
Yeah, I thought that was just the interesting one. Was like they're claiming that that's the number they're comfortable sharing. So it's obviously something they care about. It has grown considerably
Yeah.
year over year,
Yeah.
but it's still a very, very small number compared to Ghost and Substack and others. And
Yeah.
it's more crucially, it's not growing as quickly as those other ones. They are being left behind
Yeah.
rather than pulling to parity at the moment, at least based on the 2025 numbers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Which I think takes us to your next point, probably,
Yes.
if I had to guess.
It does, which is the numbers that they don't share the actual numbers, but they give you hints that you can sort of like work out how those bits of the business are doing. And the big one that Beehiiv is all in on, they've just spent a bunch of money doubling the team on it. The bet that has to pay off is the ad network. I don't know the exact numbers. Reading through, my assumption, which I would be pretty comfortable placing some money on, is that their ad network revenue last year, the total amount they paid out to creators, was somewhere between $5 and about $10 million through the year. So something between like 500,000, probably on the low end, 400,000 a month, to maybe just under $1 million on the high end, potentially, is what they're paying out each month to everybody. That's the amount of revenue, like ad revenue, that one, two, three, maybe five mid-sized publications, if we're being generous, pulls in each year.
Yep.
I know plenty of publications with like 4 or 5 people on the team that are pulling in north of a couple of million a year in ad revenue. That to me is not a good sign for the ad network, to be perfectly honest. Like that, I don't see how you get from there to a number that would be meaningful, is the challenge.
Do you think that's why, I'm just looking through now, do you think that's why they don't share that number?
Yes. They shared the number that I would share as a marketer, which is on at least, what they're basically saying is, on at least 1 month this year, we've booked $1 million in revenue.
Right.
Which is why I think I'm being generous at saying 5 to 10 million. Could be under that, could be significantly under that. If you book three months worth of ad bookings in 1 month, and that's your best month, obviously, we don't know, right? But being generous, they're smart people. I'd say 5 to 10 million seems pretty safe. But that's, again, smaller than I'm imagining a Paved, way smaller than a Live Intent. If you are running a newsletter, you don't need them for paid subscriptions. You're relying on the ad network, but nobody's making significant money from the ad network yet. So how do you get that to a place where it's going to be significant? That's my big question. Yeah.
And I think it's always going to be difficult, right? When we talked about this a little bit before, is like everything, they kind of went to CPM, right? And then I think they were basically just backing into that with CPC. I don't know if they got burned or not. I would imagine it probably was not very fun to manage for them or for the advertisers. But I think it's always going to be difficult if you're just working on a CPC basis. As for me as an operator, it's like, even the water coolest, right, about 100,000 subscribers, like there's no way I could even make a decent living just off of the Beehiiv ad network. Like I look at it as, kind of secondary inventory. Like if I don't have an ad that day, I want to throw something in. I will say, like, I absolutely love how, like, the ease of use, it's incredible. But yeah, you need to be able to make more money. And I think the thing that I'm shocked that hasn't happened yet is, and I'm curious on your thoughts on why they haven't done this from a business perspective, is why they haven't locked certain people out of the ad network, right? Because I think they have the insights. They can tell who are building kind of crappy lists or, aren't good subscribers. And why don't they kind of lock those people out? And it's only for a specific percentage of, top tier, maybe not even top tier, right? Maybe it's like the top 50% of newsletters get access to the ad network. Like that makes the advertisers happier. Like that makes you strive to build like a better newsletter and like clean your list and do a much better job about, all of those important things that we talk about all the time. And then you can probably open it up to being like CPM dollars, right? And then I think more dollars are going to flow in from advertisers, right? And this flywheel kind of starts. So I see part of the problem, the business problem, is that like they're letting this like probably bottom, I don't know what the percentage is, but bottom 25% of newsletters run ads that are kind of like ruining it for everybody. And I may be generous with those numbers, but I think I think that's part of the problem is like just make that, you have to get approved to be in the ad network, something like that. And maybe you do, but I think everyone just gets, approved at this point. So I think that's part of it. It needs to be a bit more exclusive, or they need to do some vetting of the people who are in it.
I don't have a take on that because I've never used the Beehiiv ad network, but I have spoken to a bunch of people, including someone who runs an ad network that I think did do some work with Beehiiv, like offered some supply of brands or was definitely considering it. And I think ran at least a test. And they didn't continue. They stopped working with them. And the reason that he gave was it's not the bottom 20%. It's the bottom 90 something percent is the issue.
Yeah.
There are good newsletters on Beehiiv. It's a great place to build a newsletter for a lot of reasons. But the challenge that Beehiiv has that no other newsletter platform has is the drop off from like the best newsletter to the 1,000th best newsletter on that platform is huge. Like you do not, if there were some way to like rank like the 1,000th best newsletter by content on Substack and Beehiiv, we are talking like it's like the difference between like an 18-year-old's writing and a 3-year-old. It's terrible. And that's the problem that they have. They have 28 billion emails that are getting sent a year, but those emails are by and large awful and being sent to people who probably didn't opt into them, which is the other problem.
And that's part of it's part of the business model. It's like when you are in, I don't know, maybe they're not now, but like one of the cheaper ESPs, right? Or a free ESP for a while, it's like you're going to attract all of the worst kind of people who, and I'm not even saying, people who are trying to do something illegal or sketchy. You're going to get those people too, but you're also going to get the people who just want to throw out slop emails, whether it's AI or, just written like a 3-year-old. You're going to get all those people, on the platform. And I actually used to think that was, the issue when MailChimp used to be cheaper. Like that was an issue with MailChimp. It was like everyone was on there and you risk kind of like, there was all sorts of risk with like the IP and, domain reputation, all that sort of thing. And, maybe some of that risk is, kind of shifting to Beehiiv, being, again, it comes down to like barrier to entry. And I think to your point about even like the top 90% of newsletters, like I think the water coolest falls in there in some sense. And the way I say that is like, obviously I think the content is really good, but there've certainly been ads that have not been good fits for me that I've put in the newsletter just because they were available to me. And like, yeah, that's on me. Probably not the savviest move and probably not great for my audience either. But if everyone's doing that across the board, nobody is getting good results. And to your point about, who you were talking to, yeah, I'm sure they were just seeing horrific results, because even if the water coolest is like this great publication, if there's no, product fit, with my audience, they're going to see no results, or they're going to get a bunch of clicks, and it's not going to translate to anything.
Yeah. I think the challenge is just the challenge with any ad network like this is it's not an aspirational thing, and you're not providing any value as a network. You can't, like something like Google AdSense, you can't as a publisher deal with all these different publications and insert it in the right place and do all the tracking and everything like that on an individual like viewer level, right? You don't have the data about those people. Um,
Yep.
Beehiiv, and it's not just Beehiiv, no ad network for newsletters really is doing anything on a per subscriber basis, right? It's not targeted to the individual subscribers for the most part.
Yeah.
It's just we're going to facilitate it, and the big thing that they're doing is saying to publishers, hey, you probably couldn't get a deal with HubSpot by yourself. Through us, you can get access to that. So anybody who can doesn't need it, which means anybody who's really high quality probably isn't going to be on there, or at least isn't going to run the ad for the brands that is the best fit for them, because they can get those direct. And what you're left with is a bunch of people who are desperate for money recommending things that or promoting brands that either aren't a good fit, like you say, or that the brand, if they knew, if they had the choice, would have vetoed it, basically. Which I don't know. I don't think there's a way to solve that for ad networks. I think that's why, like my bet, where we're taking Sparkloop and where I think the industry is going to go, is that is going to disappear, and you're just going to have pure performance. It's going to be like, hey, if you want to recommend, for example, HubSpot, knock yourself out. Here is a link. We'll pay you for
Hmm.
results. We're not going to pay you per impression. We're not going to pay you per click. If you send us a bunch of people who make us money, I'm happy to give you a bunch of that money, way more than you would have made on a per click basis. But I'm
Yep.
not taking the risk on these sort of fake clicks and opens and figuring that out and everything. And like, just I'll do it the way that I do with TikTok influencers and YouTube creators and everyone else. Like, why do newsletter operators get to be special and get to do it on clicks and impressions?
I totally agree. And I think that brings it back to, my point before about, you got to optimize for results. And right now, Beehiiv is not incentivizing you to do that, right? You're optimizing for clicks, which is bad. But yeah, anything else on that before we wrap it?
No, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool of them to share like the stuff that they did. Like, I appreciate them doing that, and I wish more.
But I'm glad we pointed out every single flaw that they had. So
Oh, we did. Oh, we were very kind. You saw the. I had lots of notes about stuff we could have gone into.
no,
I
no,
think
I
we were
know,
very
I know.
balanced. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm glad that all the revenue like that they have for creators is growing. Obviously, the more revenue that newsletter people make, the better. It helps our space, and yeah, I'm excited for to see what's ahead in 2026.
Yeah, me too. All right, cool. Well, that's
See
Letterland
you.
for today, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.